Alright, so today I'm trying something different, and as you may have read already from the title, I'm creating a poster. And by the way, I believe that the Matrix series have had some of the coolest looking posters that I have seen, so I have no issues with this poster whatsoever. In fact, I actually love it. I just thought since the movie's release is around the corner, may as well create something related to it. So I'm gonna try to create a very abstract poster cause you know it's the Matrix, and the Matrix is all about abstract and conceptual things, right? So I put all the stock images that I used for this edit into this group, and as I make this invisible, you see that these are the stock images that I have used. So this was the original stock image, and also everything else that I did it on top of this, and you'll see that as I move along. And if you want to download these images, the links are in the description. But unfortunately, two of the images that I have used are from Envato Elements, which is a subscription based platform. So they do offer a free trial for a month. So if you want to download, I believe it was this image and this one as well, you'd have to go to Envato Elements. So I'm really sorry about that, and I'll see if I can link similar images in the description. But yeah, other than that, everything else are downloadable and they are 100% free. So with all of that out of the way, let's get straight into the edit. So the first thing that I did is create the floor, and for that what I did is that I used this image as the base image and I cut out the floor from this document. So it looks something like this after that. And you can see a lot of layers over here. You can forget about it right now because we'll come back to it later on. And after that, I added the second stock image and I made a small cut over here in the shape of a door, and it will look something like this. And after that, using two pieces of the exact same image, I extended the wall to the ground, and it doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, this is not aligned too well, but don't worry about it too much because we'll be covering that up later on. And after that, I added this stock image on top of the wall, and then I used the color dots blending mode to blend the image into the wall. And in order to blend this image better, I double clicked on the image and it took me to this panel. Here you got a lot of blending options, and what we are going to be using right now is the blend if option. If I move this slider around, you can see that the image kind of blends into the background image, but I don't want the blending to be this harsh. I want the blending to be much more subtle. And so for that, what I did is that I went to this drop down list and I selected green. When you click on the slider while pressing the Alt or Option key, the slider splits into two, and then we can move them individually. So I moved these sliders around until I was satisfied with the right values. And I did the same with this slider as well. And after that, using a soft rounded brush with a low flow, I erased the parts from near the base. And it looked something like this after that. And then I added another stock image on top of the wall, and just like before, I extended the wall to the ground. And then I changed the blending mode to soft light. And then I added a hue saturation adjustment layer on top and I clipped it to the wall. And after that, I moved the hue slider to -47. And I think I may have accidentally disabled the layer mask, so yep. So I'm gonna press on it so that I can get rid of the pattern from here. Okay, there we go. And after that, I created the floor pattern, and for that I used this stock image right here. And what I did here is that I went to the perspective warp tool and I changed the perspective of this image to fit the perspective of the floor. And I would say that this is the step that took the longest time because it took some time to kind of go all the way around the floor. So just in case if you have never used the perspective tool, this is how it works. So you select the image that you want to change the perspective of, and after that you can press enter, which loads the selection. And now you can just move these points around so that you can fit the perspective according to your needs. So basically I did this for the whole floor, so that's why it took some time. And once you're done, you can just press enter and now you have a new perspective. And it's pretty cool, right? And after that, I changed the blending mode of the image to color dots, and then I added a hue saturation adjustment layer on top, and then I clipped it to the image. And once that was done, I moved the hue slider, the saturation slider, and the lightness slider around until I found the right color. And one thing I'll point out is that I did not choose the exact same values all the way through. In some parts of the floor, I had to use higher values of lightness, whereas in other parts, I had to use lower values of saturation and lightness. Alright, so let me go ahead and uncheck that. So if I make this visible again, you can see that there are plenty of layers over here. So I had to use a lot of different perspectives, and like I said before, it took a lot of time. But even though it takes time, it is relatively easy, and that's just about it. And after that, I did add a vibrance layer, nothing fancy. Then I cranked up the vibrance to 100. It didn't really change the effect or change the look of the floor that much, but it did make the green color more vibrant. And yeah, that's pretty much what I did here with the floor pattern. And after that, I added the stock image of this door, and I cut out just the frame so that it fit nicely into the space that we had created earlier. And once that was done, I added the model into the frame, and the model was created from 4 separate images. And as you can see, for the hair I used this stock image, and for the model's upper torso I used this stock image, and for the cape I used this stock image, and last but not the least, for the boots I used this stock image. And like I said before, the model was completely created from scratch. And finally, to fill this empty region within the door, I used this stock image and I pulled it all the way to the bottom. And then I added a layer on top, made a selection of the door, and then I filled it with white. Then I reduced the opacity of this layer to around 68%, and that is pretty much what I did here in this group. And because the door frame looked very plain, I decided to add some shadows and highlights. And that's exactly what I did here. I added an exposure layer and I reduced the exposure to -1.25, and I also changed the gamma correction as well. And then I painted in some shadows and highlights using the layer mask of the exposure layer. And also I added separate layers on top for some extra shadows and highlights. And if you may have noticed already, I used different blending modes like color dots and soft light to kind of serve that purpose. And I did the same thing with the model as well. I added mostly highlights so that there was some sort of a rim light around the model, because obviously the model would be lit from the front because of the light that's coming out of the door. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the shadows and highlights. And after that, I used the exact same stock image that I had used here on this wall, and using different blending modes, I made sure that it only affected the model. Then I copied the stock image onto a new layer and I added a motion blur to kind of create this nice effect where it almost seems like the ink is kind of escaping from his body. I mean, it's not really that obvious, but I just thought it was pretty cool, so I just kind of went with it. And after that, I went back to the floor group. And then by using different pieces of tiles from here and there, I covered this reflection so that I could replace this with a reflection of my own. So I went ahead and did that. Then all I had to do after that was to create a reflection of the model as well as the door frame. And for that, what I did here is that I flipped the image of this model vertically and I changed the blending mode to overlay. And I went ahead and did the same process for the door as well. And last but not the least, I did add some shadows and highlights on the floor so that it blended quite nicely with the environment. And oh yeah, I almost forgot. I did indeed make a circular hole over here, and in a layer underneath the floor, I added some green color so it came out through that hole. And finally, it was time for some special effects. So the first thing that I added is a gradient, and I used a greenish black gradient because it kind of mixes quite nicely with the environment. And I did change the blending mode of this gradient to overlay, and I reduced the opacity of this layer to about 20%. And after that, I added a color balance layer, and I didn't change that much, but I reduced the midtones to the cyan region just a little bit. And on top, I added an exposure layer and I reduced the exposure to around this value. And I painted in some highlights because I wanted this region to be brighter than everything else. And obviously, because it's a poster, it wouldn't be complete without the name of the movie. So I did that and I used 3 separate layers for 3 different words. And the font that I used here is called Holland. Holland? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but it's a Google font, which means that it's completely free. Big shout out to this Reddit user for figuring it out. And although it looks similar, it's not the real one. So if I disable this layer over here, you can see that I did change the font quite a bit. And using layer masks, I did add and remove bits and pieces from here and there so that it looked like the original font from the Matrix poster. And I guess that's pretty much it. And also guys, I put links to all the images that I have used today in the description, so if you want to go ahead and check it out, you can do that. And maybe you can recreate this or do something of your own. And also a quick reminder that this image and this image are from Envato Elements, which is a paid platform. So again, sorry about that, but I'll definitely link to similar images in the description that would work instead. and you can try it out. And I guess that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope you learned something of value today. Unfortunately, this is not an in-depth tutorial and I'm not really good at explaining things as I go along, so that's why I don't do it. But still, I hope you guys learned something or maybe even enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys are looking forward to watching the new Matrix movie as much as I am. And that's it. Have a good Christmas, and I'll be back with another video next week.